Husco has two main end markets. We make parts for passenger cars and for all sorts of mobile equipment, construction equipment, material handling, agricultural equipment. And I'm going to start by giving my quick forecast for 2020. And that is that it's going to be largely down. In the automotive sector in the US, we see relatively flat sales at a strong level. It's forecasted that we'll build about 17 million passenger cars in the US this year. That's really pretty good, and I think it'll stay flat in 2020. But the rest of the world is not keeping up. And in particular in China, the auto markets have really turned down pretty significantly. On the off-highway sector, it's more universally negative. We see downturns not only in the US, but in all markets around the world. So my forecast for 2020 is that Husco is going to grow, but our end markets are going to shrink, probably in the 5 to 15% range, depending on what sector and what market you're talking about. Okay, I'm going to cover 6 quick trends before I turn the podium over. This is a pie chart of where the global off-highway market or construction equipment market exists. The main message here is that the US is not the largest market. China is by a pretty significant margin the largest end market in the world for both construction equipment and passenger vehicles. That's a trend that's going to continue. The US may continue to grow, but it's going to shrink relative to China and India and those rest of the world slices. That's a trend I think will continue for several decades to come. The second trend that I'll hit on this slide is that we have reversed course from the last 30 years of increased globalization and integration of global economies. And I think over the next, not only the next year, but the next several decades, despite what I feel is a really minimal phase 1 trade agreement with China, we're going to see continued difficulty of doing business internationally. We're going to see an increasingly bipolar at a minimum between the US and China, and most likely multipolar world where trade barriers are going to spring up. And there may be some winners from that, but overall it's going to be a drag on economic growth, and certainly a drag for Husco. Okay, another slide, and this was touched on briefly. I like this illustration. Our politics are dysfunctional, and they are not getting better. This slide illustrates the fact that we used to do big landmark legislation on a bipartisan level in the United States. We no longer do so. The status quo in Washington, D.C. is now you get big things done in a one-party manner only. And that's really bad. And I think the increased polarization and division in our country is getting worse and not better. And I think that's a pretty major issue when you think about the scale of challenges that our economy is going to face over the next decade, whether it's climate change or mass immigration or technology disruption. We need a government that is capable of responding to these challenges, and I am very worried that we don't have that. And I don't think it comes back naturally. We're going to have to do something different to change things. And I've got some solutions, but I'll save that for the Q&A. Okay, one really positive trend that I see. This is a chart of several decades of housing starts in the US. The housing market is a driver of a lot of the manufacturing industry in the United States. And for the last decade, we've really underinvested in housing in the United States. And I think that is going to be a tailwind as we look out, not just at 2020, but over the next decade. Just in December, we had a new housing starts number that hit a 13-year high. I think that's a bit of an anomaly. I don't think we're roaring out of this cyclical underinvestment in housing, but I think we're going to see continued growth in the housing market that will help Husco, that will help lots of end markets for manufactured products. Okay, this is the Cybertruck without the cracked window. And a great quote from Mr. Elon Musk. You know, Elon, as brilliant and groundbreaking as he is, gets a little bit aggressive with his forecasts sometimes. This was a quote he made more than a year ago about the number of autonomous electric vehicles we'd see on the road today. He clearly missed the mark a little bit, but I do think his sentiment is right. And I think the scale of technology disruption in every industry is only going to increase over the next decade. If you think just about autonomous electric vehicles, the scale of disruption is tremendous, right? Driving, when you think about taxi drivers, bus drivers, delivery drivers, truck drivers, is one of the largest occupations in the United States. Those jobs I believe, over the course of my career, will all go away. They're going to be replaced by autonomous electric vehicles. That's a major issue, and it won't happen slowly. Once we hit the technological milestones that we need to have safe autonomous vehicles, it will happen virtually overnight. That's a good thing. That's a good thing for the economy. It's a good thing for us as citizens, but it will be a bad thing for all the people that are engaged in that business today. One of the existential threats for Husco is that we make mostly internal combustion vehicle parts today. So we're thinking really hard about how do we position our technology portfolio so that in a new world where internal combustion engines may no longer exist, or at least exist in much smaller numbers, we can continue to, at a minimum, survive and hopefully thrive. I think this trend extends far beyond the automotive sector. When you think about, I was in Chicago a few months ago and went to the Amazon Go store, where you just walk in and pull stuff off the shelf, and they've got cameras and sensors that monitor you. You know, there's more than 3 million cashiers in the United States, and this technology is really ready to go. It's not like autonomous vehicles where there's some significant technology hurdles. So I think this is a major trend that will certainly affect Husco and probably affect all of your industries as well. Okay, this is my final slide, and unfortunately it's not a positive one. This is looking at the performance, the educational performance of U.S. citizens versus our international competitors over time. And the message here isn't that if you're over, I can't see the number, 55 or 65, that you're smarter than everybody else. That may be true, but the message here is that we have increasingly over time been failing to educate our youth. This is an existential problem for our nation, and unfortunately, this masks an even deeper problem. This is on average for U.S. citizens. If you look at the disparities that exist between middle and upper class white kids and middle and lower class brown kids, it looks much worse than this. There was just another survey out this week that recognized the Milwaukee area as one of the best places to grow up if you're white, and one of the worst places to grow up if you're brown. That's a travesty. And I'll end with this, because I think this is something we can do something about. And I think it's all of our responsibility to be doing something to address the educational gaps that exist in this city. You know, we are blessed. We live in the most prosperous, dynamic country that has ever existed on the face of the earth. But that is not our birthright, okay? We've had to fight for it since 1776. We've got to fight for it today. I think education is one of the major issues that we have to tackle if we want our kids to grow up with the same privileges that we did. And with that, my time is up. Thank you very much.